Hello, in this screencast I'm going to show you the continuation of the object paint and how I use it, how I'm investigating using it. Okay, so the object paint was in the ribbon panel in 3D Studio Max with the expand button there, and it had these options if you remember it from last time, the last tutorial. But this time I'm trying to make some images of New York City. This one's Times Square. So this background image is actually a sketch. You can see the lines. This is just a photograph, and the photograph's then put onto a plane. You know, a flat plane in 3D Studio Max is a bitmap, and we've got it here on the materials, and I've inverted it because it's the wrong way around. So the opacity is white and the line is black. So in the opacity channel I've inverted it so you can see through it. Okay, so the sky will be the sky color. In this case the sky color is white anyway. Okay, the sky color is white. So I've just set up this scene, and what I'm trying to do is basically try to investigate ways of using object paint and other tools to give a sort of splattering painting movement dynamic effect that I can incorporate into my scenes, into my finished graphic scenes. So this image here is one I did previously, quite a rough one. You can see the black dots are kind of giving evidence of giving sort of information about movements, yeah. And as I say, this is just rough, and these are going to be edited in Sketchbook Pro. So here's I've set up the scene. Okay, so the scene's set up here. It's got the safe frame here. Take it to perspective view. So this is the plane, and what I've done is I've made a proxy mesh. If you can see that, if I take it to show the lines, it shows you the mesh here. Now this mesh is all one object. Click on that, and this is what I'm going to paint on, yeah? Let's take it back to the view. So that view is what I'm going to paint. I'm going to paint on this object, which is all one mesh here when I select this, okay? So that will give me, when I paint the dots, a kind of perspective. So the dots, it's not that actually clear in this one, but the dots here are larger and the dots in the background are smaller. And remember, this effect is going to be one layer that I'm going to take into Sketchbook Pro along with the back layer as well. And that will be the next screencast, okay? But anyway, so we've got this here, and this is the proxy mesh, as I say. So I right click and make sure that it's not renderable, yeah? Because all I want this to do is give a reference to, this is the surface that the objects are going to be painted on, yeah? And as you saw in the last screencast, you can paint with any objects. For example, you can paint with a sphere. So let's start and show you painting with a sphere, just to demonstrate using 3D objects onto something like this. So we go to the object paint ribbon. Come on, sometimes it takes ages to expand this thing, right? Okay, so paint on selected object. So that option's there. So we're going to paint on the selected object here. And then we make sure that in the list, edit object list. So I'm going to delete this because we're not wanting to have that object to paint. And I'm going to pick the sphere. So the sphere 7, sphere 007, all right, okay, it's picked. And then it's just simple as that. You make sure it paints on the selected object. The offset is 0, so it's exactly on the object, and you can just paint away, yeah? And it's given me a nice expressive way to paint. Of course, you can get a similar effect where objects cling to meshes using the scatter tool, but unlike the scatter tool or a particle system, when you're doing this, you can you have more control where you can paint it. So for people that like drawing, sort of artists that like drawing or even sculpting and prefer to place things where they want it, have more control, and this is a good way to do it. So there we go. So just click, 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 and paint. There are some options here I can quickly show you. This rotates all the balls, but obviously because it's a ball, it's not going to rotate. The rotate's not going to have much of an effect. The scale tool, on the other hand, will have an effect. You can scale the balls up, you can scale them down. Okay, and you can have them even, random. So random is quite fun. So I'll make random sizes. Take it up and down on the slider. Okay, or you could have ramp. So ramp, quite difficult to explain. The scaling factor for each paint stroke increases and decreases through the stroke. So as you make a paint stroke, it will either increase or decrease. Yeah, so that's quite nice as well. So have a go on that. So as you make a stroke, it should increase and decrease, right? So there you go. That's using 3D paint options on an object. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this now, and I'm going to go to perspective to make sure I don't move the camera because it's positioned nicely on the proxy mesh. And I'm going to freeze everything that I want to keep. Freeze, 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 come on, freeze. My computer's slow today, I don't know why. I'm going to freeze this. And then I'm just going to delete all these balls, the spheres. Make sure that's frozen again. And then I'm going to delete this here. I'm going to go back to the camera view, camera 1. Go to perspective because I want to select something out of the field of view, unfreeze selection, and then I'm going to go to this plane. Okay, so what I'm going to do is paint with this plane because I want this effect, this dot effect. I don't want 3D balls, I want little dots that give a more sort of fleckled paintbrush look, but you know, sticking to the 3D objects. So this is just a plane with a gradient map on it. So the gradient map's on the opacity, okay? So, and I'm using radial, yeah? So it's got the radial map there. So when we take it to a plane, the opacity will be at the edges and the inside will be solid. So it'll be like a dot, yeah? Okay. So just going to take that in there a bit so I can edit it. Go back to camera. I'm going to shrink this because I don't want it a big dot when I paint. I just want it a small dot. And then I'm going to select this because this is what we're going to paint on. And then I'm going to go to select object, yeah? So select object, edit object list, and I'm going to pick this object here. So that's on my list to paint with. Yeah, we can close this. And now it's going to paint on selected objects, which is this, and the offset is 0, is nothing. So it's going to paint exactly on the object. So I'm going to select paint with objects in list. Just one note, you can paint with more than one object in the list, so you can have, you know, different shapes or different images on your planes, and that can give a nice effect as well. It switches between all the different objects. Okay, so I'm going to press paint, and what it should do is paint now on the 3D meshes. It's a bit offset because this rotates is being messed around because I just did the editing on the spheres. That should take it. No, it doesn't take it back to normal. Sometimes it's confusing this. So I'm going to anyway. let's just make it so it's a bit random like this, yeah? So I'll keep painting away. And the good thing about this is that you can scale it up as well. So if you want it a higher scale, you can make it go like this. And what I want to do is make the bases of these objects more dotty. Yeah? And as it gets higher, I want each of the objects in the scene to get thinner with dots. Yeah? So it's basically like painting or painting on a 3D model or a sculpture. Yeah? So I prefer this method because if you're using a particle system, you know, you can mess around with the effects for so long, but this is nice because it's more direct, it's more artistic, dare I say, yeah? So I'm getting that all down there. So it gives you a perspective. So these dots are obviously smaller than the dots in the foreground, which I really like, okay? So I'm going to keep doing this for a few more minutes, just dotting out until there's enough dots I feel in the scene. And I'm just going to do a very quick test render here. Okay, so it gives you the window, just to make sure everything's rendering okay. And voila, there's some dots, some nice little dots rendering here. And as I say, I could go on and paint many, many more dots. So I'm just going to paint a few more dots. What I will do for the final image that I'm going to take into Sketchbook Pro is I'm going to paint a lot of dots here. Okay. So now I'm going to make this not renderable for now. So only the dots will render. Probably I'm going to cut this bit because it'll take a while to render. So you might hear a jump. So I'll render this. Okay, so now that's rendered. It's rendered nicely. So we have the dot part of our composition. I'm not going to mess around with alpha masks or anything. I'm just going to save it as this. I'm not going to mess around with alpha masks this time, but other times I will. So I'll save this. I need to remember where to save it, which is a problem because I have so many files. Screencasts. And so I'll just save it here for now and move it into a better location after the tutorial. So we can call this dots. And there you go, the dots are now saved. And obviously now I have to unfreeze now, unfreeze all, unfreeze this, and I need to freeze this. Select everything else, hide it, and now render this part of the composition to take into Sketchbook Pro. Which is good because it didn't render. Okay, so now I'm going to have to investigate why it didn't render. Which is annoying. Okay, so I'm going to pause this. Yeah, of course, because the rendering is switched off here. Look, so right click, and now I'm going to render it again. So it's rendering away. Obviously some of this is grey, this is white, but this is just a rough idea. I'm using this to give myself ideas on how to make my next New York-based work, how to get movement in my pictures, experiment with different effects. So I'm just going to pause this again because it's rendering for a while. Okay, be back in a minute. Okay, so now it's rendered. I'm going to save it. to this folder here. Well, there's no folder here. I'm going to put it into a folder in a minute. So it's in the screencast folder, but I'm going to put it into a folder, a good ordered folder soon. So save it as a JPEG again. You should really probably save it as a bitmap or a TIFF usually. It's better quality of it. It's better quality than a JPEG. If you save a JPEG many times, the quality diminishes. It's lossy format. So okay, so I'm going to save this as background. Always give your files logical names. I try to. Sometimes I'm lazy at that, but when I give them bad names, I suffer because it takes longer to find. Okay, so save that. So that's good. So that shows you how to make, like cool looking dot things for your 2D or even 3D animated compositions. If you animate, if you did a walk past of it, the dots would obviously be in perspective. That would be interesting as well. All right, okay, well, this is the second part of the Object Paint tutorial. The third part is not really about Object Paint, but it's about how I'm going to get these into Sketchbook Pro and how I'm going to edit the effects and everything in Sketchbook Pro to experiment with the aesthetic or look I want for my latest New York works. Okay, so thanks very much. It's been great to show you this. Any comments, etc., please come forward and I'll try to answer any, or questions as well even. Okay, cheers, speak soon, bye.